The Man in the Iron Mask. Researchers found a government document, dated 1669, and in that document, no name, no crime, just an order. Build a cell with doors behind doors, and if the prisoner speaks about anything beyond his daily needs, silence him immediately. That document is real. It sits in the French National Archives today. Here is what we know for certain. Sometime in the summer of 1669, a man was escorted to the fortress of Pignerol, in the mountains near the Italian border. He arrived under armed guard. He was placed in a specially modified cell, and from that day forward, his face was never seen by the outside world again. The mask, and this matters, was not iron. Not at first. Historical records describe a covering of black velvet, fitted with an iron mechanism at the jaw. The iron wasn't for cruelty, it was for security. The lock meant no one could remove it without a key that only the prison governor held. Think about what that tells us. In 17th century France, your face was everything. Your face told people your rank, your bloodline, your right to power. Hiding a man's face wasn't just punishment, it was a deliberate, state-sanctioned removal of a person from the visible world. Whatever this man knew, or whoever he was, King Louis XIV decided that France could never see his face. Not once, not ever. And no one would write down why. Not in any document that survived. Not in any letter that was left unfurned. For 34 years. Historians found something in the transfer records that simply does not add up. And it changes everything about how we understand this case. In 1681, the prisoner was moved from Pignerol to the island fortress of Sainte Marguerite, off the coast of what is now Cannes. The logistics alone were extraordinary. A sealed carriage, drawn curtains, an armed escort through southern France, an entire operation designed to move a man without anyone seeing his face. That part you might expect. What you would not expect is what the records say happened next. The prisoner was given fine clothing. His meals were generous, better, documented accounts suggest, than what ordinary French citizens ate. The governor of the prison, a man named Saint-Mars, addressed him with what witnesses described as visible respect. Why? Why would France spend this kind of money and attention on a prisoner who, officially, did not exist? There is a recorded incident, included in letters Saint-Mars wrote to his superiors, involving a silver plate. The prisoner scratched something onto it and threw it from his window. A local fisherman retrieved it. Because the man was illiterate, he handed it directly to prison officials. The governor personally confirmed the fisherman had read nothing and released him. That one incident tells you more about this case than 100 theories. They were not afraid of the prisoner walking out. They were terrified of information walking out. DNA forensics teams in the 2000s discovered something that sent researchers back to the original records. What they found there, in the post-death documents, was not evidence. It was the deliberate absence of it. In 1698, after nearly 30 years in island fortresses, the prisoner was transferred to the Bastille in Paris. He was given a cell. He was guarded. And in November 1703, he died. His death was recorded under the name Marchioli, a name that appears nowhere in French records before that entry and nowhere after. Invented. Purposeful. A name designed to close a file without opening a question. What followed his death is documented, and it is the most revealing part of the entire case. Within hours, every item in his cell was burned. Clothing, furnishings, personal effects, all destroyed. The walls of his cell were physically scraped. Not repainted, scraped. The floor tiles were removed and replaced. This was not standard Bastille procedure. Prison records show no other prisoner received this treatment. This was pre-planned. Someone with authority over the prison had prepared for this moment. They knew what to look for, and they found it before anyone else could. The burial was conducted at night, under guard, at a location that was never entered into any official record. The post-mortem destruction is, in many ways, the most important evidence we have, because it tells us exactly how much someone needed this man to stay unknown. Voltaire found something, or claimed to. In 1751, the philosopher and writer published an account based on conversations he said he'd had with people connected to the Bastille. His conclusion? The prisoner was the twin brother of King Louis XIV. Voltaire was not a tabloid writer. He was one of the most rigorous thinkers of the 18th century, and the theory he laid out was structurally coherent. If the Queen of France had given birth to twins in the 1630s, the second child, born minutes after the first, held an equal legal claim to the throne. In an age of absolute monarchy, that was not an inconvenience. That was a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. 2 kings, 2 courts, 2 factions, and a civil war with a royal justification. The solution, according to Voltaire's sources, take the second child, raise him quietly, and when his existence became actively dangerous, remove him from public life entirely. Keep him alive, because executing a prince of France was too dangerous, but erase him completely. Witnesses described the prisoner as tall, well-built, with what they called noble bearing. Guards who briefly saw him before the mask was fitted said his face seemed somehow familiar. French royal birth records from the 1630s, and this is documented, contain gaps, corrections, and pages that historians have flagged as altered. Alexandre Dumas turned this theory into a global bestseller. The world believed it for 2 centuries. Then came the DNA. Historians found a name in a 1669 government letter, Eustache d'Auger. And when they traced that name through the archives, the twin theory began to look much less likely, and the truth began to look much stranger. D'Auger is described in the arrest authorization as a valet, a personal servant. The letter instructs the prison governor to hold him in complete isolation, allow him no contact with anyone, and, if he proves difficult, to get rid of him. Most serious historians today believe Eustache d'Auger and the man in the iron mask are the same person. The dates align. The location matches. The security measures described in the letter match those used at Pignerol. But the valet theory immediately creates its own problem. If he was just a servant, why the mask? Why 34 years of extraordinary precaution? Why the post-death erasure of an entire cell? Here is what the records suggest. Before his arrest, d'Auger was present at events, financial transactions, private meetings, diplomatic exchanges, involving some of the most powerful figures in France. He had not simply served someone, he had witnessed things at a level of government where secrets had consequences. Killing him carried its own risks. Perhaps he had already shared what he knew. Perhaps his disappearance would raise questions. The mask was the compromise. Contain him, control him, and make sure that whatever he knew died with him, on France's terms, not his. Researchers decoding the Grand Cipher in 1890 found something that governments had hidden for over 200 years. Direct references in the king's own encrypted correspondence to a specific prisoner at Pignerol. The Grand Cipher was Louis XIV's personal encryption system, one so complex it resisted every attempt at decryption, until a French military linguist named Etienne Bazry finally cracked it. Inside the decoded letters, instructions about a prisoner, security requirements, personal directives from the king himself. This is significant. It means Louis XIV was not delegating this case to a minister. He was managing it personally. 2 other figures from the historical record are worth examining alongside the cipher evidence. Nicolas Fouquet was the superintendent of finance, the most powerful official in France below the king. In 1661, he built a palace more impressive than anything the king owned. Louis XIV imprisoned him for life at Pignerol under the same governor who later held the masked prisoner. The overlap is documented. General Bourbon retreated from a military siege without royal orders in 1691. A letter decoded from the Grand Cipher references a prisoner at a location matching Pignerol. Some historians connect this directly to Bourbon. What the cipher confirms, regardless of identity, Louis XIV personally managed this prisoner's case for decades. Not a minister, the king himself. And he left no written explanation for anyone who came after him. Scientists found Bourbon DNA, confirmed royal bloodline. And when they compared it against what little remained connected to the masked prisoner, the twin theory collapsed. In the early 2000s, a research team attempted something unprecedented, using modern DNA analysis to resolve a 300-year-old mystery. Researchers built a confirmed genetic profile of the Bourbon royal line from verified remains of French monarchs. They compared this against fragmentary material, bone samples from unmarked graves near the Bastille, period hair samples that could potentially be connected to the masked prisoner. The logic. If the prisoner was Louis XIV's identical twin, his DNA should closely match the king's confirmed profile. It was not. The analysis found no evidence of the near-identical genetic relationship you would expect between twins. A family connection, half-sibling or illegitimate relation, could not be ruled out. But the most popular version of the story, the one Voltaire proposed and Dumas immortalized, did not hold up against the science. Researchers also investigated a possible English royal connection. King Charles II of England had numerous acknowledged illegitimate children, and a hidden English heir could plausibly have become a French political problem. The DNA evidence returned inconclusive. The science confirmed one thing above all: the post-death erasure had worked. Whoever ordered that cell destroyed 3 centuries ago had succeeded. Historians found the lettres de cachet records, thousands of them, sealed orders, no trial, no charges, no appeal. Just the king's seal and then a cell. And buried inside that legal system is the context that makes the masked prisoner's story possible. In 1682, Louis XIV completed his move of the French court to Versailles. What he built there was one of history's most deliberate exercises in power through spectacle. The Hall of Mirrors, the formal gardens, thousands of courtiers competing for proximity to the king, because proximity to the king meant everything. To be visible at Versailles was to exist politically. To be excluded was irrelevance. And to have your face forcibly hidden, your name erased, your existence denied, was the ultimate expression of what absolute monarchy could do to a human being. The lettres de cachet made it legal. A sealed order bearing the royal seal could imprison any person in France without trial, without stated charges, without any recourse. Thousands of these orders were issued during Louis XIV's 54-year reign, against rivals, religious minorities, and reportedly even embarrassing family members whose relatives paid for the service. The masked prisoner existed within this system, but the scale of precaution surrounding his case placed him in a category entirely separate from thousands of others who simply disappeared into the Bastille. Someone needed him not just imprisoned, someone needed him unknown. A forensic review panel convened in 2003, exactly 300 years after the prisoner's recorded death, and produced findings that reframed the case. Not a solution, a direction. The panel worked with digitized archives, cracked cipher documents, and modern forensic tools unavailable to previous generations. Their conclusions were deliberately careful. On the mask, researchers confirmed that continuous wearing of a velvet covering would cause progressive skin damage and vitamin D deficiency. The prisoner's survival across 34 years suggests the mask was periodically removed under guard. He was kept alive deliberately. Someone needed him alive. On the name Marchioli. The leading current theory connects this to a real person, an Italian diplomat named Count Mattioli, arrested on Louis XIV's orders after betraying a sensitive territorial negotiation. The name similarity is not coincidental. Most researchers agree. The timeline, however, creates problems. Mattioli's documented movements and the masked prisoner's records do not cleanly align. The panel's most widely endorsed conclusion: the prisoner was most likely Eustache d'Auger, a man whose knowledge of state-level events made his indefinite, controlled silence more valuable to the French crown than any alternative. Not a twin, not a king in hiding. A man who witnessed the wrong things at the wrong moment in the most absolute monarchy in Europe, and who paid for it with 34 years of anonymity, enforced, total, and permanent. Researchers found the Bastille records in 1789. The revolutionaries who stormed the prison went through everything. Among the fragments they recovered were references to an unnamed long-term prisoner held without trial, hidden behind a mask. A secret of the old regime, surfacing at the exact moment France was dismantling that regime. The legend grew in layers. Voltaire gave it credibility, Dumas gave it narrative form, Hollywood gave it a face. Ironically, the one thing the real prisoner was never permitted to show. Today, the man in the iron mask is discussed in podcasts, academic journals, forensic cold case investigations, and documentary series across 3 continents. Norway, Switzerland, the United States, Canada, Australia, Germany, countries with no political connection to 17th century France, find themselves drawn back to this story, generation after generation. The reason is not simply the mystery, though the mystery is genuine and unresolved. The reason is what the story reveals about power. A government with no checks and complete control over information can erase a human being so thoroughly that 3 centuries of scholarship, technology, and DNA science cannot definitively say who he was. He may have been a servant, he may have been a secret heir. What is certain, he was a real person. He spent 34 years unable to show his face. He died under a false name, and someone believed his true identity was dangerous enough to hide forever. Whether they were right, that question died with Louis XIV. And 3 centuries later, it remains unanswered.